The rain hammered against the windshield of the K9 unit cruiser as Sarah Collins navigated through the industrial district of Atlanta. The wipers struggled to keep pace with the downpour, creating a rhythmic symphony that filled the silence between her and Max. In the passenger seat, or rather in the specialized K9 compartment behind a protective barrier, Max sat alert, his dark eyes fixed on the road ahead as if he could sense what was coming. Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Unit K9-7, this is dispatch. We have confirmation on the warehouse location, 1247 Howell Mill Road. Suspected drug operation. Backup units are en route. ETA 12 minutes. Copy that, dispatch," Sarah responded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline beginning to course through her veins. "K9-7, arriving on scene in 4 minutes. She glanced in the rearview mirror at Max. The Belgian Malinois was a statue of controlled energy, his black and tan coat sleek even in the dim light of the vehicle. His tactical vest bore the Atlanta PD insignia, and the small camera mounted on his harness blinked with a faint red light. Everything he saw, the department would see. "Ready, boy?" Sarah asked softly. Max's ears perked forward. He knew that tone. It meant work. It meant purpose. The warehouse district was a graveyard of American industry. Rusted metal structures, broken windows, and graffiti-covered walls that told stories of abandonment and decay. Sarah had worked this area for 6 years, and she knew every alley, every hiding spot, every shadow that could conceal danger. She pulled the cruiser to a stop, 2 blocks from the target location, killing the headlights. Protocol dictated waiting for backup, but Sarah's instincts screamed otherwise. The tip had come from a reliable informant, someone who had never steered her wrong. A shipment of fentanyl-laced heroin was supposed to arrive tonight, and the Red Vipers, Atlanta's most violent gang, would be there to receive it. Sarah checked her service weapon, a Glock 22, ensuring a round was chambered. She attached her body camera, tested her radio one more time, and then opened the K9 compartment. Max bounded out with practiced precision, immediately sitting at her left side, awaiting commands. "Max, with me. Quiet approach." The dog understood. His training was impeccable. Together they moved through the rain-soaked street like shadows, Sarah's hand resting on her weapon, Max's nose working overtime to process the hundreds of scents the storm carried. The warehouse loomed ahead, a 3-story structure with broken windows and a loading dock that had seen better decades. A single dim light flickered inside on the ground floor. Sarah counted 3 vehicles parked haphazardly near the loading area, 2 black SUVs and a white cargo van. She keyed her radio. "Dispatch K9-7 on scene. 3 vehicles present, proceeding to recon. Backup status." Static, then more static. Sarah frowned and tried again. "Dispatch. Do you copy?" Nothing. A cold sensation crawled up her spine, the same feeling she'd learned to trust over the years. Something was wrong. Max's body tensed beside her, his ears flattened slightly, and a low growl rumbled in his chest, so quiet only Sarah could hear it. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Max's nose pointed toward the left side of the warehouse, where a service door stood slightly ajar. Sarah's training kicked in. She should retreat, wait for backup, reassess, but the radio silence nagged at her. What if the operation was compromised? What if evidence was being destroyed right now? She made a decision that would change everything. "Max, heel." They approached the service door with extreme caution. Sarah's hand was now firmly on her Glock, her breathing controlled, every sense heightened. Max moved in perfect synchronization with her, his training overriding his instinct to rush ahead. Sarah pushed the door open slowly. The hinges groaned, a sound that echoed through the cavernous space inside. The interior of the warehouse was a maze of old machinery, shipping containers, and support columns. The flickering light came from a bare bulb hanging in the center of the main floor, casting long, dancing shadows. Voices. Sarah heard them. 3, maybe 4 different speakers. They were arguing about something, their words muffled by distance and the echo of the empty space. Sarah moved deeper inside, using the containers for cover. Max stayed close, his body coiled like a spring ready to release. They reached a vantage point behind a rusted forklift, giving Sarah a clear view of the scene below. 5 men stood around a wooden table covered with plastic-wrapped bricks of what Sarah immediately recognized as narcotics. But what caught her attention was the man standing slightly apart from the others. He wore an Atlanta PD jacket. Sarah's heart sank. Corruption. She'd suspected it for months, had seen the signs, but seeing it with her own eyes was different. She activated her body camera with a subtle tap, ensuring everything was being recorded. One of the gang members, a tall man with a red bandana and elaborate tattoos covering his neck, slammed his fist on the table. "You said we'd have protection tonight. Where the hell is it?" The officer held up his hands defensively. "It's handled. The K9 unit was redirected. You've got a clean window until 2300 hours. Sarah's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. This was a setup. She needed to leave, needed to get this evidence to internal affairs, needed to... A hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Sarah's training exploded into action. She drove her elbow backward, connecting with ribs. She heard a grunt of pain, spun, and came face to face with a Red Viper enforcer, a massive man with a scar running down his face. Max launched himself at the attacker without hesitation, his jaws clamping down on the man's forearm with crushing force. The enforcer screamed, trying to shake Max off, but the dog held firm, his training and loyalty absolute. "Officer, down here!" The enforcer managed to shout before Sarah's fist connected with his jaw, dropping him. But the damage was done. The warehouse erupted into chaos. The men below scattered, drawing weapons. Sarah heard the distinctive sound of slides being racked, safeties being clicked off. "Max, out! Out now!" Sarah ran, Max immediately disengaging and sprinting beside her. Gunfire erupted behind them, the sharp crack of pistols, the deeper boom of shotguns. Bullets pinged off metal containers and shattered concrete. Sarah returned fire as she ran, not aiming to kill but to suppress. Her radio was useless. Her backup was 12 minutes away, might as well be 12 hours. They reached the service door, but more Red Vipers were pouring in from the loading dock. Sarah was trapped between 2 forces, outnumbered and outgunned. "Max, find exit!" The dog's nose went to work immediately. He darted left, weaving through machinery, and Sarah followed. Trust. That's what their partnership was built on. Absolute trust. Max led her to a narrow gap between 2 shipping containers, too small for most men, but perfect for a desperate officer and her K9 partner. They squeezed through, just as bullets chewed up the metal behind them. Sarah's shoulder screamed in pain. She'd been hit, though adrenaline kept her moving. Blood soaked through her uniform, warm and sticky. They emerged into a small office area, desks covered in dust, filing cabinets left open, papers scattered everywhere. Sarah spotted a window, already broken, an exit. "Max, jump!" The dog didn't hesitate. He leapt through the window frame, landing in an alley outside. Sarah followed, gritting her teeth against the pain as she hit the wet pavement and rolled. They were outside, but the Red Vipers weren't giving up. Sarah could hear them kicking through the office, shouting coordinates, organizing a pursuit. She stumbled to her feet, her vision swimming. Max was there, pressing against her leg, supporting her weight. The dog's eyes met hers, intelligent, worried, determined. "Good boy," she whispered. "Get us home." Max took off at a pace Sarah could barely maintain, leading her through alleys she didn't recognize, taking turns that seemed random, but weren't. The dog was navigating by scent, by memory, by an intelligence that went beyond training. Sarah's radio suddenly crackled to life. "K97, this is dispatch. What is your status? Backup units report heavy gunfire at your location." Sarah wanted to laugh. Now the radio worked. Now backup was concerned. "Dispatch," she gasped into the radio. "Officer down. K97 compromised, requesting immediate medical and internal affairs." "Copy, K97, units converging on your location. Stay on the line." But Sarah couldn't. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed against a dumpster in an alley 3 blocks from the warehouse. Max immediately sat beside her, his body forming a barrier between Sarah and the mouth of the alley. The rain continued to fall, washing blood from Sarah's uniform, mixing with the grime of Atlanta's forgotten streets. She kept pressure on her shoulder wound, her training keeping her conscious when her body wanted to surrender. Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights began to paint the walls of the alley. Max didn't move. He sat vigil, his eyes scanning for threats, his ears processing every sound. When the first patrol car screeched to a halt and officers emerged with weapons drawn, Max positioned himself protectively over Sarah. "Easy, boy," one officer said, recognizing the K9 unit markings. "We're here to help." Max only relaxed when Sarah's hand touched his head. "Good boy," she whispered. "Good boy, Max." Paramedics rushed in, applying pressure to her wound, checking her vitals. Sarah was lifted onto a stretcher, but she refused to let them separate her from Max. "He comes with me," she said firmly, despite her weakening state. "Ma'am, we need to—" "He comes with me." The paramedics exchanged glances and nodded. Max was allowed to jump into the ambulance, staying close to Sarah as they raced toward Grady Memorial Hospital. In the organized chaos of the emergency room, Sarah's mind kept replaying what she'd seen. The corrupt officer, the red vipers, the setup. Someone had tried to kill her tonight, and someone inside the department had helped. As doctors worked on her shoulder, extracting the bullet and stitching her up, Sarah made a silent vow. She would find out who betrayed her. She would expose the corruption. She would bring them all down. Max lay on the floor beside her bed, his eyes never leaving her face. In that moment, Sarah understood something profound. In a world of lies and betrayal, this dog was the only partner she could truly trust. The next morning, heavily medicated but conscious, Sarah received a visitor. Not the internal affairs investigator she'd requested, not her K9 unit supervisor. It was Chief Marcus Brennan himself. He entered the hospital room with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. Tall, silver-haired, with eyes that could charm or intimidate, depending on what he needed. He'd been chief for 8 years, and his reputation was legendary. "Officer Collins," he said warmly, but Sarah detected something beneath the warmth, something cold. "Hell of a night you had." "Sir?" Sarah responded carefully. Max, lying by her bed, raised his head but didn't growl. Brennan pulled up a chair, sitting close, too close. "The warehouse was cleaned out by the time our teams arrived. No drugs, no red vipers, nothing but shell casings and blood. Your blood." Sarah's heart sank. The evidence, it was gone. "I gave my statement to the officers on scene," Sarah said. "There was a shipment. There were gang members. And there was an Atlanta PD officer working with them," Brennan finished. "Yes, I read your statement." Silence hung between them. Brennan leaned forward. "Sarah, you're a hero. You and Max survived an ambush. The department wants to honor you. But there's a problem. Sir, your radio malfunction. The fact that you went in without backup. The absence of any evidence to support your claims." His eyes hardened. "Some people might think you made mistakes tonight. Reckless mistakes." Sarah's medical monitors began to beep faster. "With respect, sir, I know what I saw." "I'm sure you do." Brennan stood, adjusting his jacket. "Get some rest, Officer Collins. When you're ready to return to duty, come see me. We need to have a very important conversation about your future." He left without another word. Sarah stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Something was deeply, terribly wrong, and somehow she knew her nightmare was only beginning. Max whimpered softly and rested his head on her bed. Sarah's hand found his fur, gripping it like an anchor in a storm she couldn't yet see, but could definitely feel approaching. 3 days after the warehouse ambush, Sarah sat in her small apartment in Midtown Atlanta, watching the morning news with growing unease. Max lay beside her on the couch, his head resting on her lap, providing the only comfort she could find in a world that suddenly felt hostile and foreign. The local news anchor smiled professionally at the camera. In other news, Atlanta Police Department celebrates the heroic actions of K-9 officer Sarah Collins, who single-handedly disrupted a major drug operation in the industrial district last Thursday. Officer Collins sustained injuries during the operation, but is expected to make a full recovery. Chief Marcus Brennan praised her dedication to duty. Sarah's jaw clenched. The story was a lie, a carefully constructed narrative that bore no resemblance to what actually happened. There was no mention of the ambush, no mention of corruption, no mention of the officer she'd seen collaborating with the Red Vipers. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Chief Brennan's office, 1400 hours today, don't be late." Sarah's shoulder throbbed beneath the bandages. The bullet had done more damage than the doctors initially thought, tearing through muscle and grazing bone. She'd been prescribed pain medication strong enough to flatten an elephant, but she'd taken only the minimum. She needed to stay sharp. Max sensed her tension and nuzzled her hand with his wet nose. Sarah smiled despite herself and scratched behind his ears. "What do you think, boy? Should we trust the chief?" Max's response was to lick her face, his version of saying that as long as they were together, everything would be okay. At 13:30 hours, Sarah put on her dress uniform. The Atlanta PD blues fit perfectly, freshly pressed, the silver badge polished to a mirror shine. She studied herself in the mirror, 33 years old, green eyes that had seen too much, hair pulled back in regulation style. She looked like the model officer. She felt like a target. Max wore his tactical vest, camera activated. Sarah had learned to never go anywhere without documenting everything. The drive to Atlanta Police Headquarters took 20 minutes through midday traffic. The building was an imposing structure of glass and concrete in downtown Atlanta, a symbol of law and order that now felt more like a fortress hiding dark secrets. Sarah and Max entered through the main entrance. Officers nodded respectfully as they passed. Some offered congratulations on her successful operation. Sarah smiled and thanked them, all while feeling like a fraud participating in a lie. The elevator ride to the 5th floor, where the chief's office resided, felt like ascending to a judge's chamber. Sarah's heart pounded, but she kept her breathing steady. Max sat perfectly still beside her, his brown eyes watching the numbers climb. Chief Brennan's secretary, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, greeted them warmly. "Officer Collins, the chief is expecting you. You can go right in." Sarah knocked twice and entered. Brennan's office was exactly what one would expect from a man of his position. Large, impeccably organized, with commendations and photos covering the walls. A picture of Brennan shaking hands with the mayor, another with the governor. Awards from community organizations. Everything screamed legitimacy and honor. Brennan stood behind his desk, dressed in his formal uniform, every ribbon and medal perfectly aligned. He smiled, that same warm smile that had charmed city officials and terrified subordinates for nearly a decade. "Sarah," he said, gesturing to a chair, "please sit. Max is welcome too, of course." Sarah sat, and Max immediately positioned himself between her and Brennan. A subtle protective stance that didn't go unnoticed. "Loyal dog," Brennan observed. "That's rare these days. Loyalty." "Max has never given me a reason to doubt him, sir," Sarah replied carefully. Brennan's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in his eyes. "Unlike humans, you mean?" "I didn't say that, sir." "No, but you're thinking it." Brennan sat down, leaning back in his expensive leather chair. "You're wondering why the evidence from the warehouse disappeared. You're wondering why your statement about a corrupt officer hasn't resulted in an internal affairs investigation. You're wondering if the department you've served faithfully for 6 years has betrayed you." Sarah remained silent, her hands folded in her lap. Brennan continued, "Let me ease your mind, Sarah. You're not crazy. Everything you saw that night was real. The drugs, the Red Vipers, the officer working with them." He paused, letting that sink in. "And you're absolutely right to be concerned." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Sir?" Brennan stood and walked to the window overlooking downtown Atlanta. "Do you know what it takes to run a city like this, Sarah? Not the official version they teach at the academy, the real version. It takes compromise. It takes understanding that the world isn't black and white. It's various shades of grey, and sometimes you have to work in those grey areas to maintain order. I'm not sure I understand, sir. Brennan turned to face her, and for the first time, Sarah saw the real man behind the decorated uniform. His eyes were hard, calculating, without a trace of the warmth he'd shown moments before. "Let me be clear then," Brennan said. "The Red Vipers control significant portions of this city's drug trade. They're violent, yes, but they're also predictable. We have an arrangement. They keep their activities contained to certain areas. They don't target civilians unnecessarily, and in exchange, we don't interfere with their primary operations." Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. "Sir, that's practical," Brennan interrupted. "It's practical, Officer Collins. We can't stop the drug trade. It's impossible. But we can manage it. We can minimize collateral damage. We can protect the neighborhoods that matter." The neighborhoods that matter?" Sarah's voice rose, despite her attempt to stay calm. "Sir, every neighborhood matters. Every citizen deserves protection." Brennan sighed, as if explaining basic mathematics to a slow student. "Idealism. I remember when I had that. 28 years on the force, Sarah, and I've learned that idealism gets people killed. Pragmatism keeps this city functioning." Max growled, so low that only Sarah could hear it. She placed a calming hand on his head. "The officer you saw at the warehouse," Brennan continued, "was there on department business. He maintains our relationship with the Red Vipers. He ensures they stay within acceptable parameters. What you witnessed was not corruption. It was diplomacy." Sarah's mind reeled. She'd spent 6 years believing in the badge, in the oath, in the idea that justice mattered. Now the chief of police was telling her it was all a performance. "Why are you telling me this?" Sarah asked quietly. Brennan returned to his desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out a manila folder and slid it across to Sarah. "Because you're at a crossroads, Officer Collins. What you do next will determine everything." Sarah opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Surveillance images of her at the warehouse, her body camera footage, her medical records, and most disturbing of all, photographs of Max at her apartment, at the park, at the K9 training facility. "What is this?" Sarah demanded. "Insurance," Brennan replied calmly. "The warehouse was supposed to be empty that night. You weren't supposed to be there. Someone made a mistake, and that mistake nearly cost you your life. I'm sorry about that, truly. You're apologizing for trying to have me killed." "I'm apologizing for the miscommunication that put you in danger," Brennan corrected. "There's a difference. Now, we need to contain the situation. Your body camera footage and your official statement need to be revised." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Revised? The official story is already public. You disrupted a drug operation, sustained injuries, but succeeded in scattering the suspects before they could complete their transaction. No drugs were recovered because the suspects escaped with them. No corrupt officer because there was no corrupt officer. Just a heroic K9 team doing their job." "That's a lie." "It's the version that keeps everyone safe," Brennan said, "including you and Max." The threat was implicit, but clear. Sarah looked down at Max, who was watching Brennan with the intense focus he usually reserved for suspects. "What if I refuse?" Sarah asked. "What if I go to Internal Affairs? What if I go to the FBI? The media?" Brennan smiled sadly. "Then several unfortunate things would happen. First, your body camera footage from that night would mysteriously become corrupted. Already done, actually. Second, a routine drug test would reveal that you were under the influence of your prescription pain medication during a critical operation, calling your judgment into question. Third, witnesses would come forward suggesting you've been under significant stress lately, possibly suffering from PTSD. He paused, letting each point land like a physical blow. Fourth, and most importantly, the K9 program would undergo a comprehensive review. Safety concerns would be raised about Max specifically. Incidents would be cited, fabricated ones, but documented nonetheless. and Max would be deemed too aggressive, too unpredictable. He'd be retired from service and, unfortunately, these aggressive dogs rarely find good homes. They usually have to be put down for public safety. Sarah shot to her feet. "You son of a—" "Sit down, Officer Collins." The command was sharp, authoritative. Sarah remained standing, her hands shaking with rage. Brennan's voice softened, becoming almost fatherly. "Sarah, I don't want to do any of that. You're an excellent officer. Max is an exceptional K9. I want you both to continue serving this department with distinction. All you have to do is understand the reality of the situation and work within it. You mean become part of your corruption? I mean accept that the world is complicated and that sometimes good people have to make difficult choices to protect the greater good." Brennan stood, walking around his desk. "Think about it, Sarah, really think. If you expose this arrangement, what happens? The red vipers don't disappear. They just become more violent, more unpredictable. The officer you saw dies, probably killed by the very gang he was managing. And the violence that follows kills innocent people. Other officers who are part of this system go to prison, their families destroyed. And for what? So you can feel morally superior." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to scream that right and wrong weren't negotiable, but Brennan wasn't finished. "Or," he continued, "you accept a commendation for your bravery, you continue your excellent work with Max, and you help us maintain order in this city. You'd be surprised how much good you can still do, Sarah, even within a compromised system. Maybe especially within a compromised system, because you'd have the freedom to actually make a difference where it counts." The arguments were seductive, twisted versions of logic that tried to make evil sound reasonable. Sarah had been trained to resist interrogation, to withstand pressure. But this was different. This was her chief, the man who represented everything she'd sworn to uphold, telling her that the oath itself was a lie. "I need time," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," Brennan replied smoothly. "Take the weekend. Rest. Heal. Think about what I've said. But Sarah, understand this. Come Monday morning, I need your answer. Either you're with us, helping to manage the chaos and protect this city in the only way that actually works, or you're against us. There is no middle ground. There is no fence to sit on." He walked to the door and opened it, a clear dismissal. Sarah stood, her legs unsteady. Max immediately pressed against her, providing physical support. As she reached the door, Brennan spoke one more time. "Officer Collins, I truly hope you make the right choice. For your sake, for Max's sake, for everyone's sake." Sarah didn't respond. She walked out of the office, past the kind-faced secretary, into the hallway that suddenly felt like a prison corridor. She made it to the elevator, pressed the button, and held herself together with sheer willpower. The elevator doors closed. She was alone with Max. And then she broke. Tears streamed down her face as 6 years of service, of pride, of belief in something larger than herself, shattered into pieces. Max whined and pressed closer, trying to comfort her in the only way he knew how. "What do I do, Max?" she whispered. "What the hell do I do?" The elevator reached the ground floor. Sarah wiped her eyes, straightened her uniform, and walked through the headquarters with her head high. No one could see her breaking. No one could know that her world had just collapsed. She drove home in silence, Max watching her from his compartment, his intelligent eyes full of concern. When they reached her apartment, Sarah collapsed on the couch, and Max immediately jumped up beside her, against all regulations, but Sarah didn't care. She held her partner, her friend, the one creature in the entire world she knew would never betray her, and tried to think. Brennan had given her an impossible choice, her soul or her safety, compromise her principles or lose everything, including Max. As the afternoon sun filtered through her apartment windows, casting long shadows across the floor, Sarah made a decision. It wasn't the decision Brennan wanted. It wasn't the safe decision. But it was the only decision she could make and still look at herself in the mirror. She pulled out her laptop and began researching independent journalists, FBI field offices, corruption watchdog organizations. If the department was compromised from the top, she needed allies outside the system. Max watched her work, his head tilted slightly as if understanding that their lives were about to change forever. "We're not going down without a fight, boy," Sarah said quietly, scratching behind his ears. "Brennan wants my soul. He's going to have to take it from my cold, dead hands." Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number, this time a photo attachment. Sarah opened it and felt her blood run cold. It was a picture of Max at the dog park that morning, playing with other dogs. But someone had drawn a red circle around him, and below the image was a single word: choose. They were watching. They were always watching. Sarah looked at Max, who was now alert, sensing her distress. In that moment she understood the true depth of Brennan's threat. This wasn't just about her career or her reputation. This was about the life of the one being she loved more than anything. Brennan had found her weakness and was willing to exploit it without mercy. Sarah's hands trembled as she deleted the photo, but the image was burned into her mind. The weekend that Brennan had given her to think wasn't a courtesy. It was psychological warfare. Every hour she waited, every moment she hesitated, they would remind her of what she stood to lose. She looked around her apartment. The home she'd built, the life she'd created, the partnership with Max that had defined her adult existence. All of it was suddenly hanging by a thread, and the person holding the scissors was a man she'd once respected and admired. "God help me," Sarah whispered into the gathering darkness. "God help us both." Max licked her hand, a gesture of unconditional love and loyalty. And in that simple act, Sarah found her answer. She didn't know how yet, but she would find a way to fight back. She would find a way to expose Brennan without sacrificing Max. She would find allies, gather evidence, and bring down the entire corrupt system. It was impossible. It was dangerous. It was probably suicidal, but it was right. And for Sarah Collins, that had to be enough. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that made Atlanta feel like a pressure cooker. Sarah hadn't slept more than 2 hours, her mind racing through scenarios, contingencies, and the growing realization that she was about to go to war with one of the most powerful men in the city. Max sensed her restlessness. The dog had stayed close all night, his body pressed against hers on the bed, providing warmth and comfort that no human could match. Now, as dawn broke, he sat by the window, watching the street below with the vigilance of a trained sentinel. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an encrypted number she didn't recognize. "Piedmont Park, north entrance, 0900 hours, come alone, bring Max, we can help." Every instinct screamed trap, but Sarah had run out of options. Brennan's deadline was Monday morning, less than 48 hours away. She needed allies, and she needed them now. She dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, a plain grey t-shirt and a lightweight jacket that concealed her service weapon. Max wore his vest, but Sarah removed the department-issued camera and replaced it with a personal one she'd purchased years ago. If she was going into the shadows, she needed her own documentation. Piedmont Park was one of Atlanta's jewels, a massive urban green space in the heart of Midtown, popular with joggers, families and dog owners. At 9 in the morning on a Saturday, it would be crowded enough to provide cover, but open enough to spot surveillance. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, parking 3 blocks away and approaching on foot. Max walked beside her, his nose working overtime, processing thousands of scents. She trusted his senses more than her own eyes. The north entrance was marked by a large stone archway covered in ivy. Sarah scanned the area, looking for anything out of place. A person paying too much attention, a vehicle lingering too long, any sign that Brennan's people were watching. "Officer Collins!" Sarah spun, her hand instinctively moving toward her concealed weapon. Max tensed, ready to attack or defend depending on her command. The man standing behind her was in his 60s, with steel-grey hair, weathered features, and eyes that had seen too much. He wore casual clothes but carried himself with an unmistakable air of law enforcement. Retired, Sarah guessed, but not long retired. Easy, the man said, raising his hands to show they were empty. My name is Robert Hayes. I'm a friend, or at least I'm trying to be. How did you get my number? Sarah demanded, not relaxing her stance. I still have some connections in the department, people who are tired of what's happening. Hayes gestured toward a nearby bench. Can we talk? I promise you, I'm not working for Brennan. Sarah studied him carefully. Max's body language was neutral, alert but not aggressive. The dog's instincts were usually reliable. 5 minutes, Sarah said. They sat on the bench, Max positioning himself between them, watching Hayes with unblinking focus. Hayes smiled sadly at the dog. Beautiful animal. My partner was a German shepherd named Rico. Lost him to cancer 3 years ago, right before I retired. Best partner I ever had, and I had plenty of human ones. You were K9? Sarah asked, slightly softening. For 12 years. Before that, narcotics. Before that, beat cop. 32 years total with Atlanta PD. Hayes's expression darkened. Until I learned what you just learned, that the department I'd given my life to was rotten from the top down. Sarah's heart raced. You know about Brennan? I know about more than Brennan, Hayes replied quietly. He's just the current face of a system that's been corrupt for at least a decade, maybe longer. I tried to expose it 5 years ago. Nearly got me killed. Definitely got me forced into early retirement. Why should I trust you? Hayes pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a photograph. It was taken at the warehouse, the same warehouse where Sarah had been ambushed. But the photo was dated 6 months earlier, and it showed the same corrupt officer she'd seen, along with 2 other Atlanta PD personnel she didn't recognize. I've been documenting this for years, Hayes explained, building a case, gathering evidence. But every time I got close to having enough to take to the FBI or a federal prosecutor, something would happen. Witnesses would disappear. Evidence would be destroyed. People who helped me would suddenly stop helping. Sarah looked at the photo, then back at Hayes. If you've been working on this for years and haven't succeeded, what makes you think I can do anything? Because you have something I never had. You have proof of direct involvement from the very top. Brennan met with you personally. He made threats. He admitted to the arrangement with the Red Vipers. That's not hearsay or circumstantial evidence. That's a confession. I don't have any recording of that meeting, Sarah said bitterly. No proof, Hayes smiled. Are you sure about that? Sarah's mind raced. The body camera on her uniform had been disabled. She'd checked. But then she remembered Max's vest camera, the personal one she'd installed that morning. But she hadn't been wearing that in Brennan's office. She'd only started using it today. Hayes saw her confusion and chuckled. Your dog's department-issued camera. Brennan told you it was disabled, corrupted, right? Yes. He lied. Or rather, he told you a partial truth. The feed to the department servers was cut, but the camera itself was still recording to its internal memory. I have a friend in tech services who pulled the data before it could be wiped. Every word Brennan said to you is documented. Sarah's hands began to shake. You have it? You have the recording? Not me personally, too dangerous. But yes, it exists, stored in multiple secure locations. Cloud servers, physical drives, safe deposit boxes. If anything happens to me or my allies, the information automatically gets released to every major news outlet and federal agency in the country. For the first time in days, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. What do you need from me? Hayes's expression turned serious. I need you to keep playing along with Brennan. Tell him you'll cooperate, become part of his inner circle, feed us information about operations, schedules, the extent of the corruption. We need to know everyone involved, officers, city officials, organized crime connections, everything. Sarah's hope evaporated. You want me to be a spy inside my own department. I want you to be what you've always been, a good cop trying to do the right thing. The only difference is now you know the enemy is wearing the same uniform. Max whined softly, sensing Sarah's turmoil. She absently stroked his head, thinking through the implications. If I agree to this, Sarah said slowly, I'm putting myself in constant danger. Brennan's not stupid. He'll be watching me, testing me. Yes, he will, Hayes agreed. But you're already in danger, Officer Collins. The moment you walked into that warehouse and saw what you saw, you became a liability to them. The only question now is whether you're a liability they can control or one they need to eliminate. If you refuse Brennan's offer, you won't make it to Christmas. Maybe not even to Halloween. The blunt assessment hit Sarah like a physical blow. And if I work with you, what are my chances then? Better than 50-50, which is the best I can offer. But at least you'd be fighting for something instead of just trying to survive. Hayes leaned forward. Look, I know this is terrifying. I know you're being asked to risk everything. But think about all the other officers like you, good people who joined to make a difference, and now find themselves trapped in a system they can't escape. Think about the communities being destroyed by the drugs and violence that Brennan's arrangement facilitates. Think about what kind of world you want Max to live in. Sarah looked down at her partner. Max's brown eyes stared back at her with complete trust and devotion. He didn't understand corruption or moral dilemmas. He only understood loyalty and love. I'll do it, Sarah said quietly. But I have conditions. Name them. First, Max stays safe no matter what. If this goes sideways, I need your guarantee that he'll be taken care of. Not by the department, by someone trustworthy who will treat him well. Hayes nodded. My daughter lives in North Carolina. She's a veterinarian, grew up around police dogs. If something happens to you, Max goes to her. You have my word. Second, I want to know everyone on your team. No more mystery numbers and encrypted messages. If I'm risking my life, I deserve to know who I'm working with. Fair enough. There are 4 of us. Me, the tech specialist who pulled your camera data, a journalist named Monica Reeves, who's been investigating police corruption for the Atlanta Tribune, and a federal prosecutor named James Chen, who's been waiting years for a case solid enough to take on City Hall. Sarah committed the names to memory. And third, if at any point I think Max is in immediate danger, I'm pulling out. Evidence or no evidence, case or no case. His life is not negotiable. Understood, Hayes said. Anything else? Sarah thought for a moment. How do we communicate? Brennan will monitor my phone, my emails, everything. Hayes pulled out what looked like an ordinary fitness tracker. Wear this. It tracks your heart rate, steps, all the normal stuff. But it also has an encrypted messaging system. Press the button 3 times rapidly, and it sends a distress signal to all of us. Press it twice, and it opens a secure chat. The department's surveillance won't detect anything unusual. Sarah took the device and fastened it around her wrist. When do I tell Brennan I'm in? Monday morning, as he requested. Be convincing. Show some reluctance. He'd be suspicious if you seemed too eager. Tell him you're doing it for Max, which is partially true. He'll believe that because it's the weakness he's already identified. They stood to leave. Hayes offered his hand, and Sarah shook it. One more thing, Hayes said. Brennan will test you, probably soon. He'll ask you to do something compromising, something that makes you complicit. Don't refuse outright, but try to minimize the damage if you can, and document everything. We need to build not just a case against Brennan, but against the entire network. What kind of test? Hayes's expression was grim. With men like Brennan, it's usually something violent, probably against someone who's become a problem for them. He'll want to see if you're willing to cross that final line. Sarah felt sick. You're asking me to become the very thing I swore to fight. No, Hayes said firmly. I'm asking you to pretend to become that thing long enough to destroy it from within. There's a difference. Don't lose sight of who you really are, Sarah. That's the only way you survive this with your soul intact. He walked away, disappearing into the growing crowd of park visitors. Sarah stood there for a long moment, Max pressed against her leg, and wondered if she'd just made a deal with the devil or found salvation. The rest of Saturday and all of Sunday passed in a blur of anxiety and preparation. Sarah rehearsed what she would say to Brennan, practiced her lies until they sounded like truth. She also started carrying a small digital recorder disguised as a pen, per Hayes's advice. Sunday evening, Sarah received a text from Brennan himself. My office, 0800 Monday. I trust you've made the right decision. Sarah typed her response carefully. I'll be there, sir. No commitment, no promises. Just confirmation that she'd attend. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep at all. She lay in bed with Max beside her, staring at the ceiling, and thought about all the ways this could go wrong. She could be discovered and killed. Max could be hurt, or worse. The evidence Hayes claimed to have could be fabricated or insufficient. The whole thing could be an elaborate trap. But she also thought about the alternative. Living as Brennan's puppet, watching the department she loved become a tool for organized crime, knowing that her silence made her complicit in every crime the Red Vipers committed. At 07:30 Monday morning, Sarah put on her uniform for what felt like the first time, but would actually be one of many times to come. Each one a performance, a lie wrapped in blue fabric and silver badges. Max seemed to understand the gravity of the moment. He was unusually quiet during the drive to headquarters, his eyes watching Sarah with an intensity that was almost human. They entered Brennan's office at exactly 0800. The chief was already there, looking fresh and confident behind his desk. "Officer Collins," he greeted her warmly. "Please sit." Sarah sat, Max at her side. She'd rehearsed this moment 100 times, but her heart still pounded like a drum. "I assume you've had time to think about our conversation?" Brennan asked. "Yes, sir." Sarah's voice was steady, despite the churning in her stomach. "I want to make something clear. I'm not doing this because I agree with you. I'm not doing it because I think your arrangement with the Red Vipers is right or just." Brennan's expression remained neutral, but Sarah saw a flicker of interest in his eyes. "I'm doing it because you've left me no choice," Sarah continued. "You've threatened my partner, my career, and my life. I'm doing it because I love Max more than I hate what you're asking me to do." Brennan leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Honesty. I appreciate that, Sarah. Lesser people would have pretended to see things my way, told me they understood the complexity, but you're admitting you're being coerced. That's smart. It means I can trust your compliance, if not your enthusiasm." "What do you want me to do?" Sarah asked. "For now, nothing. Return to duty. Continue your excellent work with Max. When I need you for something specific, I'll let you know." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "These are your new orders. You'll be reassigned to the Special Operations Division, working directly under Commander Phillips. He's aware of our arrangement." Sarah took the folder without opening it. "Is there anything else, sir?" "Just one thing." Brennan's smile faded. "You made the right choice, Sarah. In time you might even come to see the wisdom in it. But know this, the moment I suspect you're working against me, the moment I think you've become a liability rather than an asset, Max dies. Not retired, not reassigned, dead, and you'll be the one who has to pull the trigger or watch while someone else does. Do we understand each other?" Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "Perfectly, sir." "Good. Dismissed." Sarah stood, saluted, and left the office with Max. She made it to the elevator, down to the parking garage, and into her cruiser before allowing herself to breathe normally. The fitness tracker on her wrist buzzed twice. She glanced down at the encrypted message from Hayes. "Well done. Welcome to the team. Stay safe." Sarah looked at Max, who was watching her from his compartment with those knowing brown eyes. "We're in it now, boy," she whispered. "God help us both." Itun, and as she drove out of the parking garage into the Atlanta morning, Sarah Collins began her new life as a double agent in a war she wasn't sure anyone could win. 2 weeks into her new assignment with the Special Operations Division, Sarah had learned to live 2 lives simultaneously. By day, she was the model officer, efficient, obedient, and quietly compliant with Commander Phillips's increasingly questionable orders. By night, she was a spy, documenting everything and feeding intelligence to Hayes and his team. The strain was beginning to show. Sarah had lost weight, dark circles had formed under her eyes, and her hands occasionally trembled when she thought no one was watching. But Max was always watching, and the dog's concern manifested in staying closer than usual, his protective instincts heightened by sensing Sarah's constant stress. It was a Wednesday evening when Brennan's test finally came. Sarah was at home, reviewing footage from her concealed camera, when her secure phone buzzed. Commander Phillips's name appeared on the screen. "Collins," she answered. "Officer Collins, we have a situation requiring your immediate attention. Report to the following address in civilian clothes. Come alone with Max. Do not inform dispatch." Phillips rattled off an address in Mechanicsville, one of Atlanta's rougher neighborhoods. Sarah's blood ran cold. This was it, the test Hayes had warned her about. "Understood, sir. ETA 20 minutes. She changed quickly into jeans and a dark hoodie, strapped on her concealed weapon, and activated every recording device she had. The pen recorder, Max's camera, even her phone set to audio record in her pocket. If she was going to cross a line, she'd document every second of it. The address led to a rundown row house with boarded windows and graffiti-covered walls. A black SUV was parked outside, one Sarah recognized as belonging to the department's tactical unit. Commander Phillips stood by the vehicle, smoking a cigarette, his face illuminated by the streetlight. "Officer Collins," he greeted her. "Glad you could make it. Max looks ready to work." Sarah approached cautiously. "What's the situation, sir?" Phillips took a long drag on his cigarette before responding. "We have a problem inside that house. A witness who was supposed to testify about Red Viper operations next week. He's had a change of heart, claims he wants protective custody, and is threatening to tell federal investigators about our arrangement if we don't provide it." Sarah's heart sank. "What are my orders, sir?" "Go inside. Convince him to reconsider. Use whatever methods you deem necessary." Phillips's eyes were cold. "The chief needs this problem resolved tonight. Quietly." Sarah understood the implication. They wanted her to kill him, or at least be complicit in his death. "Sir, if this individual is requesting protective custody, perhaps we should follow orders, Officer Collins," Phillips interrupted. "Or have you already forgotten your conversation with Chief Brennan, the one about consequences?" The threat was clear. Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand, sir." "Good. You have 30 minutes. Make it count." Sarah approached the house with Max at her side. Her mind raced, trying to find a way out of this nightmare that didn't end with a dead witness or her own exposure as a spy. The front door was unlocked. Sarah pushed it open, her weapon drawn, Max alert and ready. The interior was dark, lit only by a single lamp in what had once been a living room. A man sat in a chair in the center of the room, mid-30s, thin, with the haunted look of someone who'd seen too much and survived too long in a dangerous world. His hands were bound to the chair with zip ties. "You're the K9 officer," the man said, his voice rough with fear. "They said you'd be the one." "What's your name?" Sarah asked, lowering her weapon slightly. Marcus Webb. I've been running product for the Red Vipers for 3 years, made good money, kept my head down, but last month I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Cops and gang leaders meeting, planning operations, dividing territories. They said if I kept quiet I'd be protected, but I can't anymore. I have a daughter, 11 years old. I need to get her out, before this life swallows us both. Sarah felt sick. This wasn't a hardened criminal. This was a desperate father trying to protect his child. "Marcus, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Sarah said, holstering her weapon. "The people who sent me here want me to make sure you don't testify. Do you understand what that means?" Marcus's eyes filled with tears. "They're going to kill me." "Not if I can help it," Sarah whispered. She pulled out her concealed phone and sent a 3-tap distress signal on her fitness tracker. Then she turned to Max. "Max, guard!" The dog immediately positioned himself between Marcus and the door, ready to attack anyone who entered. Sarah worked quickly to cut Marcus's zip ties with a small knife from her pocket. "When I tell you, you're going to run out the back door. There's an alley behind this house. Take it north for 3 blocks, then east. There's a coffee shop called Revelator. Go inside and ask for Robert. Tell him Sarah sent you. He'll get you and your daughter into protective custody. Real protective custody, not department custody." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. "Why are you helping me?" "Because it's the right thing to do. and I'm tired of doing the wrong things." Sarah finished cutting the ties. "But Marcus, you need to understand, when you run, they'll know I let you go. My life becomes exponentially more dangerous. So you'd better make sure you testify, and you'd better make sure your testimony brings down everyone involved. Deal?" "Deal," Marcus said, rubbing his wrists. "Thank you. God bless you and your dog. Save the blessings for when we actually survive this," Sarah replied. "Now go. Run. Don't look back." Marcus bolted for the back door and disappeared into the night. Sarah watched him go, then took a deep breath and prepared for what came next. She fired 2 shots into the floor, then used her radio to contact Phillips. "Sir, suspect fled out the back. I'm in pursuit with Max." "What the hell happened, Collins?" Phillips's voice was furious. "He had a knife hidden in his sock. Cut the ties before I could stop him. I'm tracking him now." Sarah ran out the back door with Max, following Marcus's scent trail for show, but deliberately going in the wrong direction. She spent 15 minutes running through alleys before radioing in again. Lost him in the warehouse district. Scent trail went cold near the railway tracks, multiple routes of egress, requesting additional units to establish a perimeter. There was a long pause before Phillips responded. "Return to the original location, Officer Collins. Now." Sarah's stomach twisted. She'd bought Marcus time, but now she had to face the consequences. When Sarah arrived back at the row house, Phillips was waiting with 3 other officers, all part of Brennan's inner circle, all watching her with suspicion and barely concealed anger. "You let him escape," Phillips said. "It wasn't a question. He caught me off guard, sir. I underestimated him. You're a highly trained K9 officer with 6 years of experience. You don't get caught off guard by a strung-out informant." Phillips stepped closer, his face inches from Sarah's. "The chief is going to be very disappointed, and when Chief Brennan is disappointed, people suffer consequences." Sarah maintained eye contact. "Then I'll accept whatever consequences he deems appropriate, sir. I failed the operation. That's on me." Phillips studied her for a long moment, then smiled, a cold, calculating expression that made Sarah's skin crawl. "Oh, you'll accept consequences, all right, but not tonight. Tonight you're going to fix this mess. You're going to find Marcus Webb before he reaches federal protection. And when you find him, you're going to finish the job you failed to do here." "Sir, with respect, that wasn't a request, Officer Collins. That was an order. You have until sunrise. If Webb is still breathing when the sun comes up, Max won't be breathing by sunset." "Am I making myself clear?" Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "Crystal clear, sir. Good. Now get out of my sight before I decide to solve both problems right now." Sarah left with Max, her mind racing. She had maybe 8 hours before Brennan's people realized Marcus had reached Hayes and safety. 8 hours before they understood she'd betrayed them. 8 hours to figure out her next move. She drove to a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city, parked in the back, and pulled out her secure phone. A message from Hayes was already waiting. "Package received. Moving him and daughter to federal protection. You need to disappear. Tonight. They'll know by morning." Sarah typed back, "Can't run yet. Need evidence of tonight's orders. Need to document who gave the kill order and why. Otherwise it's just my word against theirs." Hayes's response was immediate. "You're risking everything for evidence we might already have. Not worth your life." Sarah smiled grimly and typed, "It's not about evidence anymore. It's about making sure everyone involved goes down. I want Phillips on record ordering a hit. I want the connection to Brennan documented beyond any doubt. Give me 24 hours. "You don't have 24 hours. You have until they find out Webb is in federal custody. Then I'd better work fast." Sarah put the phone away and looked at Max, who was watching her from the passenger seat with those intelligent, worried eyes. "One more day, boy," she whispered, scratching behind his ears. "One more day of this nightmare, and then we bring them all down, or we die trying." The next morning, Sarah reported to headquarters as usual, acting as though nothing had changed. She attended the morning briefing, where Commander Phillips announced that witness Marcus Webb had fled protective custody and was considered a fugitive. The lie was delivered with such smoothness that Sarah almost admired the skill involved. Almost. After the briefing, Sarah was summoned to Brennan's office. This time, the chief wasn't alone. Phillips was there, along with two other high-ranking officers Sarah recognized from Hayes's dossier, both on the corruption payroll. "Officer Collins," Brennan began, his voice dangerously calm. "We seem to have a pattern developing. First the warehouse ambush, where you claim to have seen things that disappeared. Now a prisoner escaping from your custody. I'm starting to wonder if you're incompetent or something worse." Sarah maintained her composure. "Sir, I accept full responsibility for last night's failure. I should have been more cautious." "Yes, you should have." Brennan stood and walked around his desk. "But fortunately, we have another opportunity for you to prove your loyalty. We've located Marcus Webb. He's in a federal safe house in Decatur. We need someone to gain entry, eliminate the target, and make it look like a Red Viper retaliation. You're going to be that someone." Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Sir, a federal safe house will have agents, surveillance, protocols. Which is why we're sending our best K9 unit," Brennan interrupted. "You'll pose as a local officer responding to a domestic disturbance call. Max will provide the distraction you need to get past security. Once inside, you complete the mission. Simple, clean, and it sends a message to anyone else thinking about cooperating with federal investigators." Sarah realized this was the endgame. Either she committed murder, cementing her place in Brennan's conspiracy, or she refused and confirmed their suspicions that she was working against them. "When?" Sarah asked. "Tonight, 2200 hours. Phillips will provide the details." Brennan's eyes bored into her. "Don't fail this time, Officer Collins. Max's life depends on it, and so does yours." Sarah left the office knowing she had less than 12 hours to either find a way out or accept that she was going to have to cross a line she could never uncross. She spent the day pretending to prepare for the operation while actually coordinating with Hayes. The plan they developed was desperate, dangerous, and had about a dozen ways it could fail catastrophically, but it was the only plan they had. At 2145 hours, Sarah approached the safe house in Decatur, dressed in full tactical gear with Max at her side. Federal agents were indeed present, 2 outside, at least 2 more inside. Phillips had provided her with fake credentials and a cover story about a domestic disturbance at a neighboring address. Sarah's heart pounded as she approached the first agent. "Officer Collins, Atlanta PD K9 unit. We got a call about a disturbance. Mind if we do a quick sweep to ensure no one's hiding in the area?" The agent checked her credentials. Credentials that would hold up to initial scrutiny, but would flag in the system within hours. "This is a secure federal location, officer. We can't allow unauthorized personnel." That's when Hayes's team made their move. A black van screeched to a halt at the end of the street. 4 men in Red Viper colors jumped out, firing automatic weapons at the safe house. It was all blanks and flashbangs, no real danger, but the federal agents didn't know that. In the chaos that followed, Sarah and Max slipped inside the safe house while the agents engaged the fake threat. She found Marcus Webb cowering in a back bedroom, his daughter clutching him in terror. "It's me," Sarah said urgently. "The attack outside is a diversion. You have about 90 seconds before federal agents realize it's a setup. There's a car waiting 3 blocks north. Run. Now." Marcus grabbed his daughter and ran. Sarah counted to 30, then fired her weapon into the ceiling and activated her radio. "Shots fired! Suspect escaping out the back! I'm in pursuit!" She chased after Marcus and his daughter, Max running beside her, but again took deliberately wrong turns. By the time federal agents and Sarah's backup arrived, Marcus Webb had vanished into the night, this time for real, into a witness protection program that Brennan couldn't touch. But Sarah knew the game was over. The fake Red Viper attack would be investigated. Her credentials would be flagged. The pieces would come together, and Brennan would realize he'd been played. She had hours, maybe less, before the hammer fell. Sarah returned to her apartment and found Hayes waiting in the parking lot with Monica Reeves, the investigative journalist. "It's time," Hayes said simply. "We have enough. Your recordings, Webb's testimony, the paper trail we've been building, it's enough to bring charges. Is it enough to win? Sarah asked. Hayes hesitated. It's enough to try. That's the best I can give you. Sarah looked at Max, then back at Hayes. Then let's end this. Tonight. Before Brennan has a chance to destroy evidence or eliminate witnesses. Monica Reeves stepped forward. I've already written the story. It publishes in the morning edition, but I can release it online right now if you're ready. Federal prosecutor James Chen has convened a grand jury. They're ready to move on arrest warrants within the hour. Sarah took a deep breath. This was it, the point of no return. Do it, she said. Publish everything. Arrest everyone. Burn it all down. Within minutes, Monica's story went live on the Atlanta Tribune's website. Massive corruption scandal rocks Atlanta Police Department, chief accused of criminal conspiracy. Within the hour, federal agents descended on police headquarters, armed with warrants. Chief Marcus Brennan was arrested at his home, along with Commander Phillips and 15 other officers. By midnight, Sarah's phone was ringing non-stop. Reporters, fellow officers, internal affairs. She ignored them all and sat on her couch with Max, watching the news coverage of the department she'd served, collapsing in real time. Hayes sat beside her, his weathered face showing relief and exhaustion. You did it, Sarah. It's over. But Sarah shook her head. No, the hard part is just beginning. Trials, testimony, retaliation from Red Viper members who've lost their protection. This war isn't over, it's just entered a new phase. Maybe, Hayes acknowledged. But tonight justice was served. That has to count for something. Sarah looked down at Max, who rested his head on her lap, finally relaxed after weeks of constant tension. It counts for everything, Sarah whispered. And it cost almost everything too. Outside her window, Atlanta continued its restless sleep, unaware that tomorrow would bring revelations that would shake the city to its core. And in her small apartment, Officer Sarah Collins held her partner close and wondered what kind of world they'd helped create, and whether it would be better than the one they'd destroyed. The trial of Chief Marcus Brennan began on a cold November morning, 3 months after his arrest. The federal courthouse in downtown Atlanta was surrounded by news vans, protesters, and a heavy police presence. Officers from neighboring jurisdictions, since Atlanta PD was too compromised to provide security for its own chief's prosecution. Sarah Collins sat in the witness waiting room, dressed in a civilian suit rather than her uniform. The department had placed her on administrative leave pending the outcome of multiple investigations. Technically, she was still an officer. Practically, her career was in limbo, hanging by the same thin thread that held so many other things in her life. Max lay at her feet, wearing a simple collar instead of his tactical vest. He'd been officially retired from K-9 duty, not as punishment but as protection. Federal prosecutors feared that Brennan's allies, both inside and outside the law, might target Max to intimidate Sarah, or simply for revenge. Robert Hayes entered the waiting room, looking older than his 60-some years. The past 3 months had been brutal on everyone involved in the case. 2 witnesses had been attacked, 1 seriously injured. Hayes's house had been vandalized. Monica Reeves had received death threats serious enough to require FBI protection. You ready? Hayes asked, sitting beside Sarah. I've been ready since the night in the warehouse, Sarah replied. I just want this over. It will be. Soon. Hayes glanced at Max. How's he doing? Sarah smiled, the first genuine smile in weeks. Better than me, honestly. He doesn't understand why we're not working, but he's adapting. We both are. A court officer appeared at the door. Officer Collins, they're ready for you. Sarah stood, straightened her jacket, and walked into the courtroom. The space was packed, media in the gallery, federal agents lining the walls, and at the defense table, Marcus Brennan himself, looking somehow smaller than he had in his office, but no less dangerous. His eyes locked onto Sarah's as she made her way to the witness stand. The hatred in his gaze was palpable, a silent promise that even if the justice system failed to destroy her, he would find a way. Sarah placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Then she sat, faced the prosecuting attorney, James Chen, the federal prosecutor who'd been waiting years for this moment, and began to testify. "Officer Collins," Chen began, "please tell the court about the night of September 15th at the warehouse on Howell Mill Road." Sarah took a deep breath and told her story. Every detail, every moment, the ambush, the corrupt officer, the evidence she'd seen, her injuries, Max saving her life. Then she described the meeting in Brennan's office, the threats, the ultimatum, the admission of conspiracy with the Red Vipers. Her testimony was corroborated by the recovered body camera footage played for the jury on large screens. The courtroom was silent, as Brennan's own words filled the space. "We have an arrangement. They keep their activities contained to certain areas. They don't target civilians unnecessarily, and in exchange, we don't interfere with their primary operations." Sarah watched the jury's faces as they heard their police chief admitting to facilitating drug trafficking and gang violence. She saw shock, disgust, and anger. The defense attorney, a high-priced lawyer from a prestigious firm, tried to discredit Sarah during cross-examination. He painted her as a disgruntled officer, possibly suffering from PTSD, who had fabricated or exaggerated events. "Isn't it true, Officer Collins, that you were on prescription pain medication following your injury? Medications that can cause confusion, hallucinations, and impaired judgment." "I was prescribed medication," Sarah answered calmly. "I took the minimum necessary and never while on duty. My medical records show no signs of impairment." "But you admit you were under significant stress, that you'd been through a traumatic experience?" "Yes. Being ambushed and shot is traumatic, but it didn't impair my ability to recognize corruption when I saw it." The attorney tried different angles, but Sarah remained steady. She'd spent months preparing for this, rehearsing with Chen, learning to stay calm under pressure. Finally, the defense attorney made a critical mistake. "Officer Collins, you claim my client threatened your dog. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted concern for threat? That Chief Brennan was simply trying to help you understand the consequences of your accusations?" Sarah leaned forward slightly. "Sir, when someone tells you that your partner will be killed unless you destroy evidence of crimes, that's not concern. That's extortion. And when that someone is the chief of police, it's also corruption of the highest order." The defense attorney had no response to that. Sarah's testimony lasted 2 full days. Other witnesses followed. Marcus Webb, the informant she'd saved, testifying about the arrangement between police and the Red Vipers. Hayes testifying about his own investigation and forced retirement. Monica Reeves presenting documentary evidence of payments, communications, and connections between Brennan and organized crime. The prosecution built a case so comprehensive, so damning, that even Brennan's expensive legal team couldn't construct a credible defense. 3 weeks later, the jury returned a verdict: guilty on all counts: conspiracy, corruption, obstruction of justice, racketeering. Brennan would spend the rest of his life in federal prison. The courthouse erupted in applause. Sarah sat quietly in the gallery, feeling not triumph, but exhaustion. Justice had been served, but the cost had been enormous. Commander Phillips had taken a plea deal, testifying against Brennan in exchange for a reduced sentence. 15 other officers were facing charges. The Atlanta Police Department was in chaos, with interim leadership trying to rebuild trust while rooting out remaining corruption. And Sarah was unemployed. The administrative review had concluded that while her actions were legally justified, her methods, going undercover without authorization, working with outside parties, conducting unauthorized investigations, violated department protocols. She could return to duty, but only in a reduced capacity, stripped of her K-9 assignment and placed on permanent desk duty. Sarah had declined. She'd submitted her resignation the day after the verdict, effective immediately. That evening, Sarah sat on her apartment balcony with Max beside her, watching the Atlanta skyline as the sun set. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. "Hello, Officer Collins? This is Captain Maria Santos with the FBI's Public Corruption Unit." Sarah's heart skipped. Yes, ma'am. How can I help you? I was wondering if you'd be available to meet tomorrow. I have a proposition I think you might be interested in. The next day, Sarah found herself in a conference room at the FBI's Atlanta field office. Captain Santos was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Sitting beside her was a man introduced as Special Agent Derek Foster. "Officer Collins," Santos began, "we've been following your case closely. What you did, infiltrating a corrupt organization, gathering evidence under extreme personal risk, ultimately bringing down one of the most successful criminal enterprises we've seen in law enforcement. That's exactly the kind of work we do in public corruption." Sarah listened cautiously. "I appreciate that, ma'am, but I'm not sure what this has to do with me. I'm no longer a police officer." "That's actually part of why we're interested," Foster interjected. "You're not bound by departmental politics or loyalties. You've proven you can think independently, act decisively, and maintain cover under pressure. Those are rare qualities." Santos slid a folder across the table. "We'd like to offer you a position as a special consultant with the FBI, working specifically on police corruption cases. You'd train other agents, provide expertise on canine operations, and potentially work undercover in departments we suspect of corruption." Sarah opened the folder, scanning the details. The salary was good, the benefits were excellent, the work was exactly what she'd been doing for the past 3 months, fighting corruption and trying to save the system from itself. "And Max?" Sarah asked. Santos smiled. "We have an excellent K9 program. Max would be retrained as an FBI detection dog, partnered with you on appropriate assignments. He'd keep his retirement benefits from Atlanta PD and gain federal protection." It was everything Sarah could have hoped for: a second chance, a new purpose, and most importantly, a way to continue working with Max. But Sarah hesitated. The past 3 months had taught her that fighting corruption came with costs. Sleepless nights, constant danger, the weight of knowing that every decision could mean life or death for yourself or others. "Can I have some time to think about it?" Sarah asked. "Of course," Santos replied. "Take a week. But Sarah, I want you to understand something. What you did in Atlanta, exposing Brennan, dismantling that network, that's going to ripple outward. Other corrupt departments are watching. Some are scrambling to cover their tracks. Others are doubling down. We need people like you to help us find them and stop them before more officers are compromised and more communities are destroyed." Sarah left the FBI office with the folder under her arm and Max walking proudly beside her. She spent the next few days thinking, weighing her options, and ultimately making a decision that surprised even herself. She called Hayes. "Robert, it's Sarah. I need your advice." They met at Piedmont Park, the same place where Hayes had first recruited her into the fight against Brennan. This time, there was no urgency, no danger, just 2 people who'd been through a war together, trying to figure out what peace looked like. Sarah explained the FBI's offer. Hayes listened carefully, then smiled. "You already know what you're going to do," he said. "You just want someone to tell you it's okay." "Is it?" Sarah asked. "Okay, I mean, after everything that happened, after everything I lost, is it okay to jump right back into the same kind of fight?" Hayes looked out at the park, families playing, dogs running, people living normal lives protected by officers they'd never meet. "Sarah, some people are born for quiet lives. They find happiness in routine, in safety, in knowing what each day will bring. That's beautiful. That's important." He turned to face her. "But some people are born for the fight, not because they want it, but because they can't walk away when they see injustice. You're the latter. You always have been. The question isn't whether you should take the FBI's offer. The question is whether you can live with yourself if you don't." Sarah knew he was right. She'd known it since the moment Santos made the offer. "What about you?" Sarah asked. "What are you going to do now?" Hayes chuckled. "Me. I'm going to finally retire for real. Maybe get another dog. Not a working dog, just a companion. Travel a little. Visit my daughter. Enjoy the fact that Marcus Brennan is in prison and Atlanta PD is being rebuilt by honest people." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Two warriors who'd won their battle, but knew the war would continue. Finally, Sarah stood. "Thank you, Robert, for everything. I wouldn't have survived without you." Hayes stood as well and pulled her into a brief, fatherly hug. "You would have. You're stronger than you think, but I'm glad I could help. Now go be the officer, the agent this country needs." 1 week later, Sarah Collins walked into the FBI field office as Special Consultant Collins, with Max at her side, wearing a new FBI K9 vest. Captain Santos greeted them with a warm smile and a thick case file. "Welcome aboard," Santos said. "Ready for your first assignment?" Sarah looked down at Max, who stared back with those intelligent brown eyes full of trust and loyalty. Then she looked at Santos and nodded. "Ready." The case file detailed suspected corruption in a medium-sized police department in Tennessee, officers allegedly working with drug traffickers, evidence being suppressed, witnesses intimidated. It was Atlanta all over again, just a different city. Sarah opened the file and began reading, Max settling at her feet. This was her life now, hunting the corruption that poisoned good departments and destroyed communities. It would be dangerous. It would be exhausting. It would cost her things she couldn't yet imagine, but it was right. And for Sarah Collins, that had always been enough. 6 months later, Sarah testified in another federal courtroom, this time against a corrupt sheriff in Tennessee. The case was solid. Evidence she'd gathered during a 2-month undercover operation, supported by Max's detection work and corroborated by multiple witnesses. Another conviction, another corrupt official behind bars, another department being rebuilt. The pattern would repeat. Different cities, different names, same fundamental rot. But each time, Sarah fought back. Each time, Max stood beside her. Each time they made a difference. One evening, after a particularly difficult day of testimony, Sarah returned to her hotel room and found a package waiting. Inside was a handwritten note from Hayes. "Sarah, I'm proud of you. What you're doing matters more than you know. Stay safe. Stay strong. And remember, sometimes the greatest victories aren't the ones that make headlines. They're the quiet moments when a good officer stands up against a corrupt system and says, 'No more.' You said that in Atlanta. You're saying it across the country. Keep saying it. The world needs your voice." "Robert." Sarah smiled, folded the note, and tucked it into her wallet where she kept a photo of her and Max from their first day as an Atlanta PD K9 team. So much had changed since that photo was taken. So much had been lost, but so much had also been gained. Sarah looked at Max, who was sleeping peacefully on the hotel bed, something she never would have allowed during her Atlanta PD days, but had become their new normal. "We did good, boy," she whispered. "We did real good." Max's tail wagged in his sleep, and Sarah knew that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them together. Because that's what partners did. That's what heroes did. And Sarah Collins, former Atlanta PD K9 officer, current FBI corruption fighter, and forever Max's human partner, was done being anything less than a hero. The fight against corruption would continue. There would be more Brennans, more Phillipses, more officers who betrayed their oaths and their communities, but there would also be more people like Sarah, refusing to back down, refusing to compromise, refusing to let the darkness win. In the end, that was what redemption looked like. Not a single moment of triumph, but a lifetime of choices to stand for what was right, even when it cost everything. Sarah turned off the light and lay down beside Max, one hand resting on his warm fur. Tomorrow would bring new battles. Tonight, they could rest. And in the quiet darkness of a Tennessee hotel room, a woman and her dog, partners, friends, survivors, slept the peaceful sleep of those who know they've fought the good fight and won. Not because the war was over, but because they'd never stopped fighting, and they never would. The end.